from export or something, have you supplied it in India? And that is where we didn't find an answer. And those people were always, others were ahead of us. They said we supplied it in their own country. And that is where we lost out at a lot of places. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukhvinder ji, for pointing out the problems being faced by the industry in the presence of Shri Ashok Kumar Gupta ji, IAS, who is the defense production. And since Gupta ji has come, has spared his time for this meeting, some meeting is going on, some very important meeting is going on in the ministry. He has come for the very short time. I will request Shri Ashok Kumar Gupta ji to please address the gathering.
Dignitaries on the dais, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. It's my privilege to address this august gathering, attending National Conference on Defense Production, being organized by ASSOCHAM and Bharat Niti. As you are all aware, that the Make in India initiative was launched by Honorable Prime Minister in September 2014 with the primary objective of encouraging both domestic as well as foreign OEMs to make their products in India. It was a major national initiative designed to foster innovation, promote investment, and create world-class facilities. And defense was one of the sectors which was identified among the 25 sectors under this initiative. If I give you a slight background, defense production has traditionally been under the government fold. Our ordnance factories, which are 39 in number and 2 are at project stage, they started very early in 1802 at Calcutta, and 17 factories they were established prior to 1947, then 4 factories from 1947 to 1962, and then 18 factories were established post 1962. If you talk about the DPSUs, we have 9 DPSUs which are manufacturing defense products, and they were established from 1940 onwards. Being a strategic sector, the entire production was kept under the government fold. Then in 1991, July, major economic liberalization took place, but defense production continued under the government fold. It was only in 2001, for the first time, government started issuing licenses to the private sector, 10 years after liberalization, because it was felt, first of all, that requirement is huge. We need to get it supplemented by the private sector. And second, private sector has come of age. Already 10 years are over of this liberalization. Then, of course, offset came in 2005-06. And we came out with the defense production policy in 2011, which aims at creating substantive self-reliance in design, development, and production of weapon systems, equipment, and platforms required for the defense forces in as early a time frame as possible. But the key word here is by encouraging involvement of private sector. And in the last 2 years, keeping in view the Make in India initiative and defense production policy, a number of initiatives have been taken to promote private sector in the defense production. Demand side, if you see, in the next 10 years, there is going to be a procurement of $215 billion worth of equipment. And to promote private sector, there were a number of hindrances the government first of all thought of doing some ease of doing business and putting a proper right framework in place. And a major change was brought out in the defense procurement policy of 2016, where for the first time a new category was introduced, which is indigenously designed, developed and manufactured product, which means if any vendor, if any producer has got indigenously designed, developed and manufactured product, he will get overriding priority in procurement. It was to encourage the indigenous designing of the product. That was introduced for the first time in 2016. In the last 2 years, if you see that a number of contracts have been signed, and then of course, those categories remain buy Indian and buy and make Indian, and they continue to be the preferred categories after buy Indian, buy IDDM. So these are the three most preferred categories: buy IDDM, buy Indian and buy and make Indian. And if you see in the last 2 years, total number of contracts which have been signed under procurement, they are of 108 in number. Out of 108 number contracts, 73 number of contracts have been signed with the domestic vendors. There is always a lag time, and that is why it will always take time to fructify. But what I am saying is a major initiative has been taken to give tenders to the domestic vendors under this preferential policy of defense procurement procedure. Second, if you see the approvals, what we call acceptance of necessity in defense parlance, the total number of approvals which have been given in the last 2 years, 114, out of which 85 numbers have been given under these three categories, which means ultimately contract will be signed with the Indian vendor. Now you see there is a huge demand from the defense forces, and contracts are increasingly going to the domestic vendors, both in terms of the signed, what we have signed, and what approvals have been given. Now, what is there now for the foreign OEM? In case they want to leverage this domestic demand, there is no other go for them but to enter into collaboration with the domestic vendors. It can be a collaborative research followed by production. It can be a joint venture resulting in production, or they can set up their own production base also. So the route for the foreign OEMs to enter into the procurement process is through the domestic vendor. This is a very important point I want to mention. And to facilitate this, FDI policy has been liberalized. Up to 49% now, it is automatic. And beyond 49%, now it only goes to the Foreign Investment Promotion Board. And the state-of-the-art clause also has been removed. Beyond 49% approval can be given provided it results in acquisition of modern technology or for some other reasons. So wherever we are deficient in technology, wherever we are importing, for those technologies, if somebody wants to make products in India, then beyond 49% investment also is possible. Another point I want to make, that no industry can survive purely on domestic demand, because forces are the only buyer for these equipment, and the demand is sporadic. It is not continuous in nature. So we have liberalized the export regime also. Issue of NOC has been made online. End user requirement, end user certificate requirement used to be a big bottleneck, and that requirement has been dispensed with now for most of the components, spare parts, subsystems, etc. The purchasing entity, which means purchasing company alone, can certify that, and there is no requirement of counter signature from the government. List of military goods has been notified, which means anything outside the military goods list doesn't require NOC. So there is a lot of clarity now. Licensing regime also has been liberalized. 60 to 70% of the items have been taken out of the list, it means they can be freely manufactured in India. It was a big entry barrier for the small and medium sector vendors, medium sector enterprises. So that thing has been eased out. Production equipment, testing equipment, castings, forgings, all these things now are out of the purview of the licensing regime. Level playing field. There was a constant demand from the private sector that DPSUs enjoy certain benefits which are not available to the private sector. One was exchange rate variation clause, that whenever any depreciation takes place, they get the exchange rate variation, DPSUs get exchange rate variation, but private sector is not eligible. That has been extended for all the categories of procurement to the private sector also. Similarly, excise duty and custom duty exemption, they have been brought at par. So now there is no taxation issue which is impinging on the private sector, which is adversely affecting them vis-a-vis the public sector. As private sector starts producing, they also will be requiring testing facilities. And testing facilities at present are available with the forces in terms of ranges, in terms of with the DPSUs and DRDO in terms of laboratories and all. So this also we have put on the website. We have had a number of meetings within our own DPSUs and even with the private sector also, so that in case they want to avail of the testing facilities for their products, whatever they are developing, they can do so. I think our speakers have also been mentioning about lack of tier 1 vendors. We don't have a proper tier I systems. Our former chairman, Dr. Tyagi, is here. He will be able to say something on that also. He knows about it. In HL, we have got a large base of vendors, but they are tier 2 and tier 3 vendors. Tier 1 vendors are hardly there any. With the result that foreign OEMs, they find it difficult to set up their plants here because they are not able to source subsystems. They are basically integrators, and it is not the modern practice to make each and everything in-house. We are also not able to export because whatever we are manufacturing under licensed production, a number of items are imported and we need permission from the foreign countries. One category of procurement is make procedure. We have restructured our make procedure, and a number of projects have been identified. We have made it very industry friendly. We have increased the government share, government funding in the make procedure. Make procedure basically is design, development, and followed by assurance of orders. And if orders are not given, if foreclosure is there, if RFP is not issued, then the full reimbursement takes place. So under make procedure now, we want to develop a number of platforms. And there we will have our own IPRs. 20 platforms have been identified. They are going on. We are interacting with the industry. Feasibility study is going on. And in case we develop those platforms in the next 3-4 years, we will have the IPRs for those platforms. Not only will we be able to export, we can do the upgradation also in times to come. So this is a major national initiative which we are taking under the make procedure to have our own IPRs, have our own platforms, so that we can promote exports also. It will also help in development of the ecosystem, in broadening our R&D base also. At present, our DPSUs are outsourcing, but we are now encourage them to become system integrators. Regularly, constantly, we are reviewing with our DPSUs and OFB. We have come out with the outsourcing and vendor development guidelines, and we are encouraging them that they should go ahead and start outsourcing to the extent of 50, 60, 70%. This percentage is going up continuously, and we hope that there is going to be substantial opportunity for the MSMEs whenever DPSUs they outsource. In fact, they are also now displaying a list of products on their website which they are importing from the foreign countries so that import substitution can take place. Any MSME or any any large industry can pick up those items, make these items in India and start supplying. We will give them assurance of orders by entering into MOU with that particular vendor which has taken up the product for development. Offsets is a very vast subject. I will not be dealing with that. But what I want to say that so far we have got $8 billion worth of offsets to be discharged by the foreign OEMs, and this has to be discharged in the next 8 years. So you can see that approximately $1 billion worth of offsets are to be discharged for the next 8 years. It's a very good opportunity for the Indian vendors, because OEMs are scouting for the Indian vendors for discharging these offset obligations. And we have liberalized now. OEMs have started discharging offsets to the desired extent. I can give the figures also. In the last 2 years, target has been 1 billion, and they have lodged claims worth 1 billion. In 2008 to 2013, they were able to discharge 63% of the targeted offsets. But in calendar year 14 and 15, if you take these 2 years, they have been on dot. They have been able to lodge claims matching their target. This shows that whatever we have liberalized in terms of IOPs or components or rephasing is working. And we are further looking at those guidelines to increase certain avenues, to add certain avenues in our guidelines so as to help the OEMs in further discharging their obligations in a much streamlined manner. Government has recently come out with a circular also that for the startups and MSMEs, we should not insist on turnover and prior experience criteria. That also we are implementing in our DPSUs, and that's going to be a big boost to the startups. Of course, they have to qualify as a startup to avail of this benefit. Another thing our DPSUs have been doing, that they are coming out with some policy dispensation where local industry can be promoted by giving some sort of purchase preference. It used to be there earlier in DPSUs. It was discontinued in 2008. But in the defense being a separate sector, in a strategic sector, we are saying some sort of purchase preference can be given, some dispensation we can come out with, where in case they are able to match with the foreign OEM price, but give increased indigenous content, probably they can be given the orders. So we are working on that. That will also be promoting Make in India initiative. So you can see that framework is in place for the private sector to contribute in a major way in the defense production. And over the years, they have acquired tremendous capability also. Sometimes people ask questions, are we ready for all these joint ventures, collaborative R&D, etc.? I said, definitely, yes, why not? We have acquired tremendous capability, and increasingly, we are procuring from the domestic vendors. Today, let me clarify that in 14-15, 62% of the procurement was done from the domestic industry. 62% of the procurement was done from the domestic industry. In 15-16, 65% of the procurement was done from the domestic industry. And this year, up to October, 71% of the procurement has been done from the domestic industry. So increasingly, the proportion of purchase from the domestic vendor is going up. So this shows that we are reposing more confidence in the domestic industry. They are able to supply quality products they are able to meet timelines, and I am sure that we should be able to take it to 80-85% in times to come in a couple of years. Licensing, I have got the figures. In the last 2 years, more than 1/3 of the licenses have been issued, what we have issued since 2001. There is a spurt in the demand of the licenses. Similarly, exports have also gone up by 100% in the last 2 years. So all the policy dispensations which have been given, which have been made, they are having an impact. But of course, the approvals which have been given, the contracts which have been signed, they take time. There is always a lag time for the things to mature. We have created a DDP portal also. It was launched by the Honorable RM in last year, December, and it gives all the procedures and policy dispensation regarding defense manufacturing. It also, we have provided linkage with the state government policies wherever they have come out with some separate special provisions for the defense sector. A number of state governments have come out and we have linked their websites also. It is an interactive website where you can pose your questions and you will get replies also. So I request all of you to visit the DDP portal for any clarification. All our latest circulars, policies, guidelines are on the DDP portal. Thank you for giving so much time, and I feel it was a very timely initiative which ASSOCHAM and Bharat Niti has taken for organizing an exclusive national conference on defense production. And once again, I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity and allow me to share my views. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, for enlightening the gathering on the steps being taken by the government for the ease of doing business and the level playing field for the private players and boosting up the startups and the local industry and the MSME. I believe Secretary Saab has to leave. I will request the gathering if there are any questions to be asked from him.
Yeah.
We were very happy to hear about the strategic partner initiative which the minister is talking about, and we heard that a lot of action is taking place on that. Would you be able to tell us, sir, how soon can we hear about the implementation of that policy? Because that is something that would bring the real involvement of the Indian industry in a major way.
Actually, this is the item which I have not touched in my
That's why
speech also.
That's why my question.
And why? Because as a Department of Defense Production, we are not dealing with the issue. It is being dealt by the Department of Defense. So I will not be able to say anything on this particular aspect.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You have given a lot of numbers about procurement.
Mm-hmm.
How much of this procurement is capital from the Indian vendors?
See, I have given you the complete figure of capital and revenue. This is what the combined figure I have got.
So because revenues have got a lot of small stuff, whereas the
Yes. I
capital
know.
is what is,
It is a total procurement figure I have given.
but could you tell us?
I
how
don't
much-
have the breakup right now. I think I'll have to collect it.
Sir, good afternoon. This way, sir, on the right hand side. On your right hand side, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Sir, my name is Pankaj Chaturvedi. I am the Secretary General for the Indian Energy Storage Research Foundation. I have a question about the startup policy that you mentioned, sir. On new types of batteries, especially for missiles and for submarines, etc. There are several people who approach us from IISc Bangalore and other educational institutions. Could you let me know what is a good place for us to get information and disseminate to them on energy storage devices, batteries and flywheels and all?
Good place.
Yeah, where we can get the information about the government support for startups And
No, see, government support for the startup, I think you have to approach DIPP.
so for the defense production,
No, for so far as defense production is concerned, I mentioned only one aspect,
right?
and that is in case there is something innovative about
Absolutely.
the startup, then we will not insist on prior turnover and experience criteria.
Right.
That is the only thing.
So how do they apply? I mean, how do they reach out to? Who do they reach out to?
Oh, okay, okay. So no, I mean, I think like DPSUs,
Right.
they keep seeking information or keep inviting tenders
Okay,
for purchase of the items,
right.
and as a startup they can apply, and
So
they'll
this
be.
this is a quandary, sir, because the items that they are offering are not being tendered for because these are new energy storage systems.
You mean to say there is no requirement or there is no tender as such?
Right now, there is no tender.
There is no
because
tender. Okay,
suppose
okay.
you say a battery is going to last 24 hours. This
No,
capacity
I think then you can write to the department.
to the department.
I can